So for your recipe, it says for the green beans, it says 1.5 pounds of green beans. This is what it is. It's about 6 cups. So when you're making this recipe, just consider what what it is. So when you're doing this, you wash them, you cut them in the size you want, and then you boil your water, get it to a boil, and then what helps is to have a pan like this, where you have a little sieve in it. So you put your green beans in it, you put it in the boiled water, you time it for 6 minutes, you bring it out, and then you do what you call, you put it into cold water with ice in it, and you submerge it real quick, and so that stops the cooking process. So those are the green beans. That's what you do. And they say it's really important to put the salt in there. It keeps the color for the green beans. Green beans are high in fiber. They're beautiful. They're mild, and so most people like them. They're actually a part of the legume family. And they've now made them in such a way that there's not strings. They used to be called string beans. And when I used to garden, I loved to use the Blue Lake Bush green beans. I could get tons of canned green beans by the end of the season, plus the fresh ones. So that's what you do for the green beans. Simple. Of course, you can grab one of those frozen bags and just microwave it for a little bit, but you have the green beans ready. The thing that's different is the mushroom sauce. And of course, most people may use the Campbell's soup, but actually you're going to make a mushroom soup with this recipe. Keep in mind that you can use this mushroom soup for scalloped potatoes. You can use it for other soups, all that type of, it's a really good recipe, a base recipe for a soup. Now, if you are going gluten-free, then you would omit the flour. And you might use something like arrowroot powder or cornstarch, depending on your allergies. Now, in that section under sauce, it talks about sherry, dry sherry, and it talks about ground pepper and cayenne pepper. And in the recipe that I did tonight, I didn't do any of those. I don't prefer black pepper. Sometimes it's irritating to the stomach. I don't usually cook with sherry, and so those are omitted. And then some people don't like the hot cayenne pepper, but you can certainly add that. The other thing that is different in this recipe from what I did, although it kind of offers that in parentheses, is I couldn't find the Silk plain cream in any of the stores. I used to be able to get it at Kroger's, but I couldn't find it. So instead I used Wegmans almond milk, the plain without the sugar, and that's what I used. Now, when I was a teenager, I got assigned the task of making gravy. And you know how most people make gravy is that they start with the oil, and then they put the flour in there and make a roux, and then they add the different, you add liquid into it. Well, I made this really lumpy gravy, and it became the joke in our house. You know how families you get known by the mistakes that you make. So I got known as the lumpy gravy maker. So I decided that I really like my blender. So when I make gravy, I just throw everything in the blender, no matter if it's brown gravy or whatever. I put it in here, and I have my pan ready to go, and I go ahead and blend it and put it in the pan. Now we're running a little bit late tonight, so I'm kind of shortening this. But if you look there, it says to have 10 ounces of mushrooms. That's what this is. So I cut them up, and I use button, portobello, and the shiitake. I knew I was going to say it wrong. And it comes to about 3 cups. So you're to put it in the pan. And I'm not going to go ahead and warm it up here tonight. And then I use the garlic, this kind. I'm too lazy to chop it, so I bought it in this. And so this says, if you put your away from you, it says that 1 clove is 1 teaspoon. So I put the amount there that they say. So we just put that in there. And then what I did was, instead of putting oil in, I used the broth. And I know that it's already been brought up tonight. Ruth talked about it. But I use this McKay's non-chicken style broth. And you put 1 teaspoon in a cup. And so this is my 3/4 cup of broth. And what I did is I used a little bit in here to get started on the mushrooms, and then I put the rest in my blender. You put salt to taste. You put your almond milk in here. And while that's going, you have this going here. And there's the other kind of non-chicken broth that's like this, and you can get it at Whole Foods or any of the other. And one cube goes into about a cup of water, so you can use that too. Broth is really important because it gives flavor to the soup. And I call it soup because it's a lot like soup or the cream. Now this uses the flour, and I went ahead and measured this out. And I put a little bit more in it because the mushrooms got quite juicy when I was warming them up. And I wanted a thicker soup than what it was looking like. So instead of the 2 cups, I put 2 tablespoons, I put 4, and that's what this is. And then you salt to taste. And then you just blend it. And by then this has warmed up, it's started to go down, and you just put this right in with it. And then I let it thicken a little bit, and I had some time today, and I was making 6 recipes of this so that you could try it. So what I did was I ended up taking the soup, the mushroom soup, and putting it in my crock pot and let it simmer in my crock pot. You know, in French cooking, the thing about gravies and the sauces is that you let them cook at low. And I get really worried leaving it on the stove because I end up burning it and then it gets scorched and things. And I love my crock pot because you can put it in the crock pot and just let it go to it there. So you've made your, quotes, Campbell's mushroom soup, and it tastes really good. The other thing, and this isn't in your recipe, but I wanted a little heartier, more of a beefy, although I don't know what beef tastes like, but beefy flavor. And so I put a tablespoon of this Greg's aminos in. And Greg's aminos, we've already heard about it tonight, but it's made from soy protein, and the sodium content is very low. The salty flavor comes from the protein itself, the amino acids. That's what protein is made of, broken down to, is amino acids. So I put about a tablespoon in this recipe. So we would warm this up, get it nice and thick, and then from there you just pour it on top of your green beans. This is the now down to the topping, and I used some whole wheat or multigrain bread. I didn't toast it first. I just broke it in half and put it in my processor and processed it with 1 tablespoon of the Earth Balance. And this is the one I used. This is one that's in sticks, and it's used more for baking pies and things like that. So I just took a tablespoon off, of one of the sticks, and I put it into my processor. Then I didn't bring it with me, but the French fry, the fried onions, and just put it in there and made a nice topping. So they say in the recipe that if you're not going to bake your casserole right away, just hold off putting this on, but put it in the refrigerator so the margarine doesn't melt. And if you're going to go ahead and bake your casserole, then you would put this on and put it in the oven. And we put it in I put it in for about a half an hour until it was bubbling really well. But it says 325 for 15 minutes. And then you just put it on top and bake that. So that's green bean casserole. It took a lot longer than we talked about. Some people are afraid of mushrooms. We've heard the goods and the bads of the mushrooms. But just consider this, the best way with mushrooms is always to cook it first. It's the raw mushroom that has a chemical in it that's toxic or more cancer producing. But once you cook it like other foods, like the yam we heard about and other foods, if you cook it first, that chemical goes away and changes, and you don't have to worry about that.